The neon signs of Station Epsilon 9's commercial district cast shifting shadows across James Hawthorne's weathered face as he made his final rounds. After 15 years with the Earth Defense Force, he traded his captain's bars for a private security contract on this bustling space station. The pay was worse, but the freedom made up for it. His wrist computer chirped with an alert from station security. Unauthorized entry detected in Maintenance Section 7B. James sighed, already moving toward the access corridor. Probably another group of smugglers trying to bypass customs. They never learned. The maintenance section was eerily quiet when he arrived, his footsteps echoing off metal walls. The air recyclers hummed their endless song, but something else caught his attention, voices arguing in harsh whispers around the corner. "Your credentials are invalid," a rough voice growled. "And Lord Voss doesn't appreciate being deceived." "I am diplomat Zara Nixis of the Asterian Empire," a female voice replied, cold as space itself. "Your Lord Voss will regret this insult." James edged closer, drawing his pulse pistol. He recognized the name Voss, a rising crime lord who'd been causing trouble across 3 sectors. The diplomat's voice carried the distinctive melodic accent of the Asterians, a species known for their crystalline skin and fierce pride. As he rounded the corner, the scene confirmed his suspicions. 3 armed thugs had cornered an Asterian woman against the wall. Her crystalline skin shimmered with iridescent patterns of agitation, and her formal diplomatic robes were torn at the sleeve. Despite being outnumbered, she held herself with regal bearing. "Last chance," the lead thug said, raising his weapon. "Give us the access codes to the embassy vault, or—" James didn't let him finish. His first shot caught the thug's weapon, sending it spinning away in a shower of sparks. The second shot dropped another gunman with a stunner blast to the chest. The third attacker spun toward him, but the Asterian diplomat was already moving. With impossible grace, she struck out with her palm, catching the man in the throat. He collapsed, gasping. "Station security," James announced, keeping his weapon trained on the surviving thugs. "On your knees, hands where I can see them." The men complied, but the diplomat's expression darkened as she noticed James's human features. "I had the situation under control," she said, her tone arctic. "I do not require human assistance." James resisted the urge to roll his eyes as he secured the thugs. "You're welcome, Diplomat Nixis. I'm James Hawthorne, Station Security. Care to explain why Voss's men are interested in your embassy's vault?" "That is classified diplomatic information," she replied, attempting to straighten her torn robes. "I appreciate your intervention, but this matter is beyond your jurisdiction." A groan from one of the thugs interrupted them. "Doesn't matter now," he wheezed. "Signals already sent. Boss has what he needs." James and Zara exchanged alarmed looks, their mutual distrust momentarily forgotten. "What signal?" James demanded, but the thug just laughed. The station's emergency sirens began to wail. James's wrist computer flooded with alerts, security breaches across multiple sectors. This had been a distraction. "The embassy," Zara whispered, her crystalline features shifting to patterns of fear. "We must." The explosion cut her off, rocking the entire section. Emergency bulkheads began slamming shut as smoke filled the corridor. James grabbed Zara's arm without thinking, pulling her toward the nearest emergency exit. She stiffened at his touch but didn't resist. "Let go of me," she hissed as they ran. "I must return to the embassy." "That section's already sealed off," James replied, not slowing. "Unless you can breathe vacuum, we need to get to emergency control first." Another explosion shook the station. Zara stumbled, and James caught her before she could fall. This time, she didn't protest his touch quite so vehemently. "Your logic is sound," she admitted reluctantly. "But understand this, human, once we reach safety, I will handle this situation myself." James allowed himself a grim smile as they raced through the chaos. "Whatever you say, Your Excellency. But something tells me both our worlds just got a lot more complicated." He didn't mention that he could still feel the lingering warmth where her crystalline skin had pressed against his, or that the intricate patterns shifting beneath her surface were oddly mesmerizing. There would be time for those uncomfortable realizations later, assuming they survived the next few hours. Emergency control was chaos when James and Zara arrived. Station personnel rushed between monitoring stations as damage reports flooded in. Through the viewport, James could see repair drones swarming around the damaged embassy section like metallic insects. 3 breaches confirmed, a technician reported. Embassy vault's been compromised. Whatever they were after, they got it. Zara's crystalline skin pulsed with patterns of dark blue, anger, James guessed, though he was far from an expert in Asterian expressions. "I must contact my government," she said, moving toward the communications array. James caught her arm, ignoring her sharp intake of breath at his touch. "Wait. If Vasa's people hacked station security, they're probably monitoring communications too." "Remove your hand, human," she said, but with less venom than before. "While your concern is noted, I have secure diplomatic channels." "The same ones they just breached?" James raised an eyebrow. "Look, I know you don't trust humans, but right now we need each other. Whatever Voss stole, it's big enough to risk war between our peoples." Zara's patterns shifted to something more complex, uncertainty, perhaps. "You cannot understand the delicacy of this situation. The contents of that vault." She hesitated. "Let me guess, classified?" James released her arm but held her gaze. "I spent 15 years in the Earth Defense Force, diplomat. I know how to keep secrets. But I can't help if you won't trust me." Before she could respond, James's wrist computer chimed. A message scrolled across the screen, text only, heavily encrypted. His eyes widened as he read. "What is it?" Zara asked, moving closer despite herself. "An old contact," James murmured. "Says Voss is planning to auction whatever he stole in 6 hours. Guest list includes some very dangerous people." He looked up at her. "Including representatives from radical factions in both our governments." Zara's patterns flared with alarm. "Impossible. No Asterian would." She stopped, her expression hardening. "High Council Member Raxus. He's been pushing for more aggressive action against human expansion. And I bet Admiral Chen from Earth Defense would love to justify increased military presence in this sector," James added grimly. "This isn't just theft, it's someone trying to start a war." For a long moment, Zara studied him, her crystalline features unreadable. Finally, she spoke in a lower voice. "The vault contained proof of an ancient connection between our species. Evidence that humans and Asterians may share common ancestors. In the wrong hands. It could either unite our peoples or tear them apart," James finished. "Depending on how it's used. Perhaps." Zara's patterns shifted to something almost resembling amusement. "Perhaps I was hasty in dismissing human insight." "High praise indeed," James smiled. "So, partner, how do we crash an illegal auction?" "We?" She arched an elegant crystalline eyebrow. "I don't recall agreeing to a partnership. Would you prefer I let those thugs shoot you earlier?" "You are insufferably smug," she said, but her patterns had lightened to something almost playful. "Very well. But understand this, we do things my way. Wouldn't dream of anything else, Your Excellency." They spent the next hour planning in a secured maintenance office. James couldn't help noticing how Zara's initial revulsion at proximity to a human had faded to mere discomfort, then to something closer to curiosity. She asked detailed questions about his military background, his time on the station, his knowledge of Voss's organization. In turn, he found himself fascinated by the complex patterns that shifted beneath her crystalline surface, the language of emotion and thought that no human could fully replicate. When she leaned close to examine station schematics, he caught a faint scent like starlight and ozone. "The auction will be held here," she said, indicating a supposedly abandoned luxury hotel on the station's outer ring. "Neutral territory, legally ambiguous jurisdiction." "Perfect cover for people who don't want to be found," James agreed. "But I know someone who can get us inside. Former EDF intelligence, now works as a dealer in rare artifacts. She owes me a favor." "Can this human be trusted?" Zara asked, then seemed to catch herself. "I apologize. That was prejudiced," James suggested with a slight smile. "It's okay. We've all got our biases. But yes, she can be trusted. More importantly, she can get us through security without raising alarms." Zara nodded slowly. "Very well. But we will need more than access. We need proof of who's involved, evidence of the conspiracy. Otherwise, this incident could still spark conflict." "Already working on it." James tapped his wrist computer, bringing up schematics for a sophisticated recording device. Standard EDF intelligence gear, modified for covert use. "We get in, document the players, recover the artifacts, get out." "You make it sound simple." "Simple plans work best. Usually." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. They both knew the risks. If they were caught, neither government would acknowledge them. Best case, they'd spend years in a private prison. Worst case. "Why are you helping me?" Zara asked suddenly. "This isn't your concern. The artifacts, the politics, you could walk away." James considered the question carefully. "Same reason you're trusting a human after spending your life distrusting us. Sometimes you have to look past what you think you know and do what's right." Her patterns shifted to a color he hadn't seen before, something warm and complex. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither was ready to acknowledge. Finally, James cleared his throat. "We should get moving. My contact will be waiting." As they made their way through the station's back corridors, James couldn't shake the feeling that this unlikely partnership was about to change both their lives in ways neither of them could predict. And judging by the uncertain patterns shifting beneath Zara's crystalline surface, she felt it too. James's contact turned out to be a sharp-featured woman named Raven who operated out of a high-end antique shop in the station's luxury sector. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Zara, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Quite a pair you two make," she remarked, leading them through her back room. "An Asterian diplomat and an ex-EDF captain walking into my shop together. Sounds like the start of a bad joke." "We need access to Voss's auction," James said, ignoring her commentary. "Full credentials, no questions asked." Raven's expression turned serious. "You're playing a dangerous game, James. Word is the merchandise at this auction could start a war. Sure you want to get involved?" "We're already involved," Zara interjected, her patterns swirling with determination. "The only question is whether you will assist us." Something in her tone made Raven pause. She studied them both for a long moment before nodding. "Give me an hour. But this makes us even, James." While they waited, James and Zara reviewed the hotel's layout. Their shoulders brushed occasionally as they leaned over the schematics, and James noticed Zara no longer flinched at the contact. If anything, her patterns showed something like warmth when they touched. "This service corridor," she pointed, "it leads directly to the auction hall. If we need to make a quick exit." "Already spotted it," James finished. "You think like a tactical officer." "My father insisted I learn more than diplomacy," she admitted. He said true understanding between species requires knowledge of both peace and war. Wise man. He died trying to prevent a border conflict with humans. Her patterns darkened with old pain. The extremists in our government claimed it was human aggression. I believed them, until I met a human who risked his life to help an Asterian who'd shown him nothing but contempt. Her eyes met his, patterns shifting to that complex warm color he was beginning to recognize. Perhaps we all have much to unlearn. The moment was interrupted by Raven's return. She carried 2 elegant data chips and what appeared to be expensive evening wear. Your invitations to tonight's entertainment, she said, handing over the chips. And appropriate attire. Can't have you showing up looking like a security guard and a bureaucrat. An hour later, James adjusted the collar of his formal suit as they approached the hotel's main entrance. Beside him, Zara moved with fluid grace in a gown designed to enhance her crystalline features. He tried not to stare at how the fabric caught the light. You clean up well, for a human, she murmured as they passed through security. You sound surprised. Continually, it seems. Her patterns rippled with something like amusement. Though I'm beginning to appreciate the unexpected. The auction was being held in the hotel's grand ballroom, transformed into a showroom for the galaxy's wealthiest and most dangerous collectors. James recognized several faces from EDF watch lists, along with at least 3 known arms dealers. There, Zara whispered, nodding toward a distinguished Asterian male deep in conversation with a human woman in an admiral's formal dress. Council member Raxus and Admiral Chen. Together. Quite a coincidence, James muttered. Let's get closer. The recording device should pick up their conversation. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, playing the part of wealthy collectors. James kept his hand at the small of Zara's back, a gesture that felt both protective and oddly right. Her patterns responded to his touch with subtle warmth. The artifacts will prove useful, they heard Raxus say. With proper presentation, the evidence can be used to justify either unity or conflict, whichever best serves our purposes. The military-industrial complex thrives on tension, Chen replied. Peace is bad for business. Zara's patterns flared with anger, but James squeezed her arm gently. They needed more evidence. A chime sounded through the ballroom. Distinguished guests, a smooth voice announced, please make your way to your seats. The auction will begin momentarily. As they found their places, James noticed additional security personnel entering the room. Their weapons weren't completely concealed by their formal wear. We may have a problem, he murmured to Zara. Those aren't regular hotel security. Black Sun mercenaries, she confirmed. Elite contractors. Voss is taking no chances. If they start checking credentials more thoroughly, then we'll have to move quickly. Her hand found his under the table, crystalline fingers intertwining with human ones. Whatever happens, James, I want you to know. The lights suddenly dimmed, and a holographic display materialized above the central stage. An image of ancient ruins appeared, showing what appeared to be early humans and Asterians working together. Ladies and gentlemen, Voss himself stepped onto the stage, a tall figure in an immaculate white suit. Tonight's featured items will reshape the course of human-Asterian relations. The only question is. His eyes seemed to find James and Zara in the crowd, in which direction? The auction room erupted in murmurs as Voss began displaying the stolen artifacts. Ancient texts, technological remnants, and genetic data scrolled across the holographic display, each piece adding to the undeniable evidence of humanity and Asterian's shared history. Notice how he's presenting it, James whispered to Zara. Each item carefully chosen to be interpreted as either proof of ancient cooperation or ancient conflict. The perfect fuel for whoever wishes to push their own agenda, Zara agreed, her patterns shifting with concern. Her hand was still intertwined with his under the table, neither of them seeming eager to break the connection. Voss's voice carried across the room. Our first item, genetic sequencing data suggesting deliberate engineering of both species by a common ancestor. Opening bid, 10 million credits. Admiral Chen's hand went up immediately, followed by Council Member Raxus. The bidding quickly escalated as other parties joined in. James activated the recording device, documenting every bid and bidder. "We need to move soon," he murmured. "Once these items are distributed." "Agreed. But the security coverage is complete. We need a distraction." As if on cue, an alarm blared through the hotel's systems. "Security breach in level 3, an automated voice announced. All personnel respond." James glanced at Zara with newfound appreciation. "You planned this?" Her patterns rippled with something like smugness. "I may have arranged for some of my embassy's security protocols to trigger at an opportune moment. Shall we?" They moved smoothly as the guards rushed to respond to the false alarm. James guided them toward a service entrance, but before they could reach it, a voice cut through the chaos. "Stop them." Voss stood on the stage, pointing directly at them. The remaining guards raised their weapons. "The former EDF captain and the Asterian diplomat," Voss announced. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize you? That I wouldn't have contingencies?" "Actually," James said, "we were counting on it." He pulled Zara close as the lights suddenly went out, another of her prearranged security protocols. In the darkness, her crystalline skin gave off a subtle glow, just enough for him to see her face inches from his own. The patterns beneath her surface were mesmerizing, shifting with adrenaline in something else, something warmer. Without thinking, he kissed her. For a moment, everything else faded, the shouts, the chaos, the danger. Her crystalline lips were cool against his, but they warmed quickly. The patterns beneath her skin exploded in a kaleidoscope of colors he'd never seen before. When they broke apart, her eyes were wide with surprise and wonder. "That was unexpected. Inevitable," she breathed. The moment was shattered by plasma fire slicing through the darkness. They ran for the service corridor, James returning fire with his concealed weapon while Zara used her diplomatic override codes to seal doors behind them. "The evidence?" she asked as they sprinted through maintenance tunnels. "All recorded. But Voss still has the original artifacts. Without them, our governments can still claim the recording is fabricated." She grabbed his arm, pulling him to a stop. "James, we can't let them get away with this. My people, your people, they deserve to know the truth." He studied her face in the dim emergency lighting. The disgust she'd once shown toward humans was gone, replaced by a fierce determination that made his heart race. "You realize what you're suggesting? Going back in there, trying to steal the artifacts from under Voss's nose? Is it any more impossible than an Asterian diplomat falling in love with a human?" The words hung between them, unexpected but undeniable. James pulled her close again, feeling the warmth of her patterns responding to his touch. "You know, I'm starting to think impossible is just another word for inevitable." She smiled, the expression transforming her crystalline features. "Then perhaps we should make the impossible happen." They began planning their next move, but James couldn't help noticing how naturally they worked together now. Every touch, every shared glance, carried the weight of their growing connection. The barriers between their species seemed to be dissolving with each passing moment. "The main vault will be heavily guarded," Zara said, pulling up a schematic on her diplomatic tablet. "But there's a maintenance shaft that runs directly above it. If we can access it, we can bypass most of their security." James studied the layout. "But we'll need a way to deal with the sensor grid." Zara's patterns shifted to that now familiar warmth as she looked at him. "Perhaps it's time to show you another Asterian secret. Our crystalline biology has certain properties that can interfere with standard sensors. You're just full of surprises, aren't you? Says the human who keeps defying every preconception I once held." She touched his face gently, her cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "James, if we succeed. When we succeed. When we succeed," she amended, "nothing will be the same. For either of our peoples." "Good," he said firmly. "Maybe it's time for change." The station's emergency lighting cast shifting shadows around them as they prepared for their final push. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, but in that moment, all James could focus on was how right it felt to have Zara at his side. They had started as reluctant allies, divided by prejudice and protocol. Now, as they prepared to risk everything for the truth, they were something else entirely, living proof that the barriers between their species were meant to be broken. The maintenance shaft above Voss's vault was cramped, but James and Zara moved through it with practiced coordination. Her crystalline skin cast subtle patterns of light that guided their way, while her natural interference with the sensor grid kept them undetected. Security patrol approaching below, James whispered, checking his wrist computer. 30 seconds. Zara pressed closer to him in the confined space, her patterns shifting with a mix of tension and trust. The vault's internal sensors. Ready for your disruption. Just like we planned. They waited in silence as heavy footsteps passed beneath them. James found himself studying the intricate dance of colors beneath Zara's surface, no longer alien, but beautifully familiar. She caught him looking and smiled, the expression warming her crystalline features. Having second thoughts about trusting an Asterian, she teased softly. Only about waiting so long to kiss one. Her patterns flushed with that now familiar warmth, but before she could respond, his computer signaled the all clear. They moved to the access panel above the vault, and Zara placed her hand against it. Her crystalline biology immediately interfered with the security grid, creating a blind spot in their detection. James quickly cut through the panel, and they dropped silently into the vault. The stolen artifacts were arranged on display pedestals, ready for transport to their new owners. Seeing them up close, the significance of their discovery was overwhelming. Look at this, Zara breathed, examining an ancient tablet. Instructions for genetic enhancement, signed by both human and Asterian scientists. They weren't just cooperating, they were helping each other evolve. Which means someone deliberately erased this history, James added, carefully documenting each piece with his recording device. Kept our peoples separate, fostered distrust. Until now. She met his eyes. Until us. The moment was interrupted by slow applause from the vault's entrance. They spun to find Voss standing there, flanked by Admiral Chen and Council Member Raxus. Armed guards filed in behind them. How predictably noble, Voss sneered. The star-crossed lovers, trying to uncover the truth. But did you really think we'd let you expose centuries of carefully maintained separation? The truth will come out, Zara declared, her patterns blazing with defiance. Our peoples were meant to work together, to evolve together. Your truth would destabilize carefully maintained power structures, Chen countered. The military contracts, the diplomatic tensions, do you know how much profit that generates? And how much suffering it causes? James stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Zara. How many lives lost to artificial conflicts? Acceptable losses, Raxus dismissed. The status quo must be maintained. I don't think so. Zara's voice carried newfound authority. Now, Raven. The light suddenly went out, plunging the vault into darkness. But instead of chaos, a new light source filled the room, the artifacts themselves, glowing with ancient power. In the ethereal illumination, James and Zara's silhouettes seemed to merge, human and Asterian united. What's happening? Voss demanded as the artifact's glow intensified. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my own people's technology? Zara's voice rang out. These aren't just historical records, they're proof of what we can achieve together. And they're transmitting everything, your conspiracy, your crimes, your lies, to every communication channel in both our territories. The guards' weapons wavered as their comm units confirmed her words. Across the station, across space itself, the truth was spreading. The evidence of humanity and Asterians' shared destiny could no longer be contained. It's over, James announced, taking Zara's hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally now, crystalline and human flesh working in perfect harmony. Time for a new chapter in both our histories. In the days that followed, the revelation shook both civilizations to their core. But as the initial shock faded, something remarkable happened. Other humans and Asterians who had forged secret connections emerged from hiding. Scientists began openly collaborating on projects combining their species' strengths. Diplomatic relations transformed from careful tolerance to genuine cooperation. 1 month later, James stood with Zara on the observation deck of Station Epsilon 9, watching ships from both their peoples dock together. Having any regrets, he asked, drawing her close. About changing the course of history? Her patterns rippled with joy as she turned in his embrace. Only that we didn't do it sooner. Though perhaps we needed that journey to appreciate where we are now. And where are we? At the beginning, she said softly, tracing his features with cool crystalline fingers. Every achievement of our ancestors, every step of our evolution, led to this moment. To us. As they kissed, their silhouettes framed against the starfield, neither human nor Asterian, but something new, a bridge between worlds, a promise of what was possible when artificial barriers fell away. The touch that had once offended her had become the touch that would help guide their peoples into a new era. Together, they had proved that love could transcend not just protocol, but the very boundaries of species. And in doing so, they had reminded both civilizations of a truth their ancestors had known: the greatest adventures, the most profound discoveries, came from reaching across the divide to embrace the unknown. In the end, it wasn't just their story. It was the story of all those who dared to challenge the barriers between them, who chose connection over separation, understanding over fear. As humanity and the Asterians began their new journey together, James and Zara stood as living proof that the greatest power in the universe wasn't technology or politics or even evolution. It was the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to see beyond differences, to recognize the familiar in the foreign, and to love without boundaries.